want a link to um, I'm not sure which of those QR codes is my LinkedIn page now and which of them is my web page, but you've got access to both of them there as well. And at the end, I'll give you some information about the podcast as well, and perhaps I'll put that in the chat too. So yes, thank you. Yeah, I'd love to speak to anybody who is interested and wants to explore any options around volunteering and volunteering strategy, of course, and you can contact me. And even just for an informal chat is always good just to hear about what you're doing, because one of the things we do on the podcast in particular is really try to shine a light on innovation across the sector. So that's less about me talking about my work and more about you talking about yours, and me trying to share that across volunteer leaders across the sector, so we can all continually learn, improve, and make volunteering even more successful than it is so far. Anyway, so today, yes, kindred spirits, common cause. You'll find I talk quite a lot about community, so I'm on a familiar path here, but I hope it's going to be both sort of intellectually inspiring and give you some new ideas to think about, but also quite a splattering of practical opportunities and suggestions and things that you can turn into concrete actions back in the workplace as well. So let's get going. So many of you would have seen this graph before. There were various versions of it across Europe, across North America, across different parts of the UK, all showing a very similar trend, in a downward trend in participation rates and activity across the board, really, which is quite depressing in some ways. But I suppose I'm quite an optimist when I look at these things. I mean, I think they may turn around anyway once we get out to the other end of all the pandemic issues. But actually, there's still 20% of people in the UK and beyond who want to get involved in their organisation. I actually think that number's much, much bigger. But the problem is people don't know how to get involved, or we're not offering the opportunities or the right entry opportunities for people to get involved in volunteering. So I'm hoping what we'll talk about today will be about how we can just act smarter to find new ways to get people involved in our organisations, and importantly, how to keep them engaged and keep them with you, preferably as long as possible, but maybe even for years, if not decades. As Einstein probably didn't say, although it's always attributed to him, the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. So very much what I'm about is helping people rethink their volunteering, rethink their approach to involving people in their organisations, and try new things, some of which will fail, some of which will be a revelation to you. But the important thing is we need to experiment and we need to think smarter about how we do things. Otherwise, we're going to get the same results, or worse still, diminishing results. So I often start, which I think is now becoming known as Chris's onion. It wasn't originally, but I often start by asking people just to imagine their support base and draw it usually on an onion, on a picture of an onion, where the center of the onion is very much the people who really have a strong affinity to the cause that you're working for, or the organisation that you're working for. So obviously, if it's a medical or a disability charity, for instance, that's going to be the people who you are probably serving as an organisation, their family, their close family and friends. As you move out through the layers of the onion, you're going to starting to talk to more distant friends, uncles and aunts, neighbours who live down the street, work colleagues, school friends, and so on. And then you start going out a bit further, and it's people who have witnessed what you do in the local community. Maybe they've heard a talk at a local school or a church meeting, something like that. Maybe they've heard you on the radio, maybe they've seen you on BBC Breakfast if you're very, very lucky. And you're gradually going out through the different rings. They may have seen you on social media, of course, as well. And at the beginning, in the centre, you've got a small number of people who are really committed to your cause, but they're quite small in number. On the outside, you've got large numbers of people who have an affinity, and we shouldn't forget that, and we must be aware of it, but actually maybe the affinity is a little bit weaker. But I encourage everybody to sit back and draw this out and think about, well, first of all, are we reaching, as volunteer managers, all of those different layers of that onion? Are there people in there or groups in there that we should be reaching out to, but we're not, or we don't have a mechanism to reach them? Are there some that our fundraising team perhaps are reaching, but we're not? Are we not joined up on that work? Are there some that we are reaching, but we need to perhaps refresh our mechanism and our way of actually reaching out to them? I think the more we have in our mind who these individuals are, the better we are going forward, rather than just going out with sort of blanket marketing or advertising approaches. So bear that onion in your mind as we go on with the rest of the conversation today, if you can. And then we get into communities. Now, the first thing I say is recruiting volunteers is hard work. Going out to fetes and fairs, going to talk to groups, going to student events and stuff, it takes a lot of time, a lot of staff time to get out there and do that. If you're advertising in the local paper or online, it's it can be quite expensive, and the return is often not particularly good in terms of the number of people that you get. It's quite hard to get yourself heard. So my view to start with is it's much better that we really think about how we build communities of people involved in our organisations in the first place, rather than spending all our time going out and recruiting people when we've got vacancies. It makes much better sense to concentrate on that volunteer retention and that volunteer experience as much as we can in the first place, which means a lot of strategic thinking behind the scenes, up front, about succession planning. How are we going to move and allow people to move within our organisation? It means building ladders. I'll come to all of this later on, but ladders of participation where people can move up and down and around your organisation, and there's always opportunities for them to get involved. And most of all, it means building what I call lifelong value. Now, we don't always keep people for life. That's nice if we can do it. But the longer we can get people and keep people involved in our organisation, the better. So when you go to Tesco's to buy something, hopefully if you ask, and other supermarkets are available, of course, especially in the US, I don't know what Tesco, what they have there. But if you're in the supermarket and you want some mayonnaise, you ask where it is, and hopefully the person who's packing the shelves will take you to the aisle and show you the mayonnaise. If they followed their training, which they may not have done, they might even tell you about the different varieties of mayonnaise and try and be helpful. But the art of that isn't to sell you mayonnaise, of course. It's about keeping you to come back and buy your weekly shopping in said supermarket on a regular basis. And I think the same is for us in volunteering. We have to focus on that lifelong value and loyalty as much as we can in a world where people are much more transient in their volunteering than they were before. So for me, the answer to that is building communities, and lots more on that as we go forward. I also say, look at the barriers. Check there's no artificial barriers between you and fundraising and campaigning and other parts of your organisation, because often we have really great databases like Volunteero, but we'll have other databases in our organisation which hopefully are linked, but people get quite protective about whose data is whose volunteer is whose supporter belongs to who, and what we're trying to get them to do. That doesn't work when you're trying to reach out to people who actually your supporters will be donors, they will be fundraisers, they will be volunteers, and everything beyond and in between. So actually, we really need to be working together with those teams to understand how do we get the maximum lifetime involvement as much as we can from these supporters, without getting into internal squabbles or misalignment, at least, about that. If you read the vision for volunteering and all these other documents that come out, you'll know that there's big trends, and it's important that people want to think more beyond roles and long-term commitment, thinking much more about events and tasks. So it's important that within this community, we're thinking about ways that people can get involved in an organisation, drift away, go and do something else, but ultimately keep coming back and doing more over a period of time. And then we want to think about communities of interest as well as geography. What I mean for that is we used to, or most of us, recruit from our local geographical areas. And we used to have branches and groups and so on, and find local volunteers. But technology is allowing us to reach much further. And I'll come on to the different communities that we can be tapping through technology a bit later on. So how can you involve your supporters? And I'm deliberately here saying supporters, not volunteers, because as I say, I think that's what we're really talking about, building supporter base, and actually what they do and whether you call it volunteering is another issue. So what can they do? Well, they can tell your story. Quite often, those people in the centre of the onion, especially, have got really brilliant stories to tell about your organization. They'll know what's worked, what hasn't, but they'll also tell about the cause and the problems that you're trying to address, and often can be much better spokesman for you. So think about how can you involve them. You can do that very formally, you get them doing talks or so on, but you can do it informally on social media, writing blogs, recording a video, social media takeovers, talking to their workplace, their colleagues over lunch. There's loads of ways, even down to just wearing a pin badge to promote somebody, to say, well, what's that about? So you have a quick helicopter pitch communication about your organization. So think about ways that you can help and release people to tell their story, rather than feeling that you need to manage how they do that. Clearly, they can raise funds, and I don't need to go over that in detail. They can generate ideas. Your supporters often know what works and what doesn't. They can help you shape your service, but equally they come with insight and knowledge about local intelligence, about what works on the ground and what doesn't, where local services by other people are failing or otherwise. So think about how you can gather their information and get them involved. Be really key for me. Yes, they can provide services, and I think that's traditionally where a lot of volunteers come in. Yes, they can campaign. It's so much nicer. And when I speak to, which I don't often these days, but when I used to speak to members of parliament or to councillors, they used to tell me the power of the sort of personal stories they hear from supporters. And that's the thing that turns the dial, rather than the member of staff, however brilliant we all are, the member of staff sitting in the room and campaigning. So how do we engage them, both on social media, but also in the room in terms of campaigning? And then, of course, if you have a community, your community members, your supporters, they know people. It's not rocket science. The bigger your community and the better enabled they are to reach out. They can introduce you to funders. Maybe they can talk to their workplace and see if you could be the charity of the year or something like that. They can introduce you to other volunteers, their friends and their family. I'm a big fan of family volunteering. That's a whole other subject. They can introduce you to decision makers. You know, they might live next door to an MP or a councillor or somebody in the NHS or whatever is relevant to your organisation, and can make a difference. They may live next door to a major donor. Who knows? That's all these people live somewhere, so they may know these people. And lastly, co-production. How can we involve people in a shared purpose in our organisation? So when you join as a volunteer or as a supporter, what is your purpose? Do you know why you're a supporter? And one of the things you can do is co-produce solutions with staff to get things done. So that, of course, that includes your volunteering programs. So the first thing I say is, how much do you really know about the people in that onion? And I'm hoping people like Volunteero and other CRM systems will help you get to understand the data and the information that your supporters have or about your supporters. The more you can understand them, the more you can tailor your volunteering or your communications or your recruitment to meet their needs and their aspirations. So spend time analysing data. My experience is a lot of volunteering organisations are really data poor, and that has to change. If I'm truthful, you don't often find in reasonable sized organisations that fundraising data is poor. It's often volunteering data. So we need to be, as a profession, up on the same kind of level, understanding the data, presenting it to the board, presenting it to funders, and using that to leverage systems and ways forward. And as I said several times already, I often come across organisations where the volunteering and the fundraising team just aren't on the same page. And I don't mean that in any sort of competitive or criticizing kind of way, but it's really, really important that you are aligned. Now, a lot of fundraising teams will have supporter journeys, and I'll come on to that in a second. My view is volunteering needs to be right in the mix and at the heart of that as well. You can't be protective over data about individuals. Obviously, we need to deal with all the GDPR and data protection legislation, make sure we're handling people's data suitably. But the more we think of our supporters as joined up individuals who may be donors, funders, and volunteers, the better. And if we're going to talk about their experience of being involved in our causes, then actually we really do need to think of them as whole human beings, not the hats that we ask them to wear. And we need to make sure our communication is really, really slick and recognizing that, recognizing the communication they've had for other teams, and also recognizing their work and their activity that they're doing right across the board. So please do work closely with your fundraising teams, especially. And as I say, a good volunteering team, in my view, should have a supporter journey. We should know how our supporters are going to join us into our organisation. What's their entry level point or points? There'll be lots of them. How do we get them engaged? How do we keep them engaged as their experience with us continues? And again, if that's also about donating and fundraising, then that all has to be mixed into one kind of pot. So we need to think about what's their journey and give them options. And often when we talk about supporter journeys in a fundraising context, I find we're also, the conversation is always about how do we get somebody who's paying £10 a week direct debit to increase that to 15. Well, that for me isn't where we should be going with supporter journeys. Supporter journeys should be about how do we ensure this person who's giving £10 a week stays involved in our organisation for the long term. They get involved, they feel they have an ownership, they feel they belong, they feel they can help shape the organisation, and they'll be here in 5 or 10 years if possible. They may go away and they may come back, but they're going to stay involved in your organisation. That person's going to give you a lot more money, but also going to give you a lot more time over the long run. So subtly, when we're talking with fundraising teams, I would kind of say, well, just help move away from them sort of mechanistic, how do we just increase donations, to thinking how do we increase lifetime value. So here's one of my favorites, and I'm often getting people to draw these up, a sort of ladder of participation. It's so simple, but it's so helpful, especially when you're talking to members of the organisation who perhaps aren't involved directly in volunteer management, or if they are, their volunteer management is sort of add-on to their role, or maybe they don't really understand the value of volunteering. If we need to give people supporters an opportunity to have sort of choice about how they get involved in our organisation over time, we need lots and lots and lots and lots of opportunities for people to get involved. But they need to be opportunities that we can sustain and we can keep staffing and producing. So they have to be realistic. So I would say work with all of your teams, from finance to HR to the shops or whatever you have in the organisation, and really work out where participants, if they were going to get involved, could add some value to your organisation. And we need some low level of commitment opportunities, and we need some high level of commitment opportunities, and everything in between. So when someone joins an organisation fresh, especially if they're on the outside rings of that onion, they're probably not going to come along and say, I'm going to give you 15 hours a week for 5 years as a very specialised volunteer. You will get people like that, but you're going to have to work pretty hard to find those, aren't you? So actually, often we need entry-level opportunities for people to join our community and to buy into the shared purpose that we all have, but not actually perhaps providing enormous support. So the first step might just be about getting them to sign up to a newsletter, receive information, buy into the concept of I really want to support this cause, and I understand what members or supporters are trying to do. And then we might move up into interest in the information that we have and reading it a bit more, sharing the information on social media. These are just some examples, of course. Maybe doing a social media takeover, maybe going and talking to friends, or I don't know, a church group or a faith group that you're involved in, or a school, or whatever your local community activity might be, a football club, I don't know. It might be about responding to surveys and providing some intelligence and some information that will help you as an organisation make better decisions or speak with more authority to power. It might be writing to an MP. It might be fundraising. It might be doing a talk to a local school. It might be something which is high commitment, like co-production, bringing in specific skills and expertise or lived experience over a very short period of time, helping sort something out, and then disappearing again. And it might be volunteering regularly. But the thing for me is, if you're at entry level, you need to go in with the small things and gradually build people up. But equally, if someone's been volunteering for a long while and their lifestyle changes, they finish university, they go on and start a new job, their health deteriorates, they retire. All these things are times when people tend to transition out of organizations as volunteering. If we've got a really healthy ladder of participation, it just allows people to, instead of sailing off into the sunset, allows people to step down a rung, move down to something else, keep receiving the newsletter and the information, dip in and out of volunteering, back to the lifetime value. That if we don't allow people to, or don't encourage people just to sort of give up because as an organization we haven't got new things for them to do, we need to create those opportunities so people can move around the organization. And when the time's right, they'll come back to full-time volunteering as well. So really think hard and what those ladders and those journeys might look like. And as I said, I'm very interested in how we build communities of interest. Now we have the technology to do it rather than just dealing with the people we can speak to physically in a geographical location. And the example I give here, and forgive me if anyone's seen some of these before, but is, and forgive the really bad artificial intelligence as well. It's not quite up to scratch. But, you know, if you're, my example here is an environmental charity who might be really interested in, for instance, the condition of the rivers in the UK. Well, why would you not perhaps build up a community of interest of somebody else who shares an interest in those environmental situations, people who spend time on the riverbank. So the example I've given here, of course, is some hobby anglers who will spend time. They will be concerned about the state of the river. They can talk about it on social media. They can share ideas and campaigns. They can formulate campaigns to try and influence people, or they can get together and do some rubbish clear-ups or whatever they might want to do along the riverside. And I'd encourage everyone to think about their organizations. What are the unique groups of individuals that you might be able to bring together in an online capacity who have maybe a professional or a hobby affinity to your cause, an interest in what you do, and you can mobilize them as almost as a campaigning base to do some work for you. And one of my favorite examples of that is Good Gym. Over here in the UK, I think most of the listeners are, I'm not sure. Very much Good Gym is one of my favorite charities at the moment, who very simply bring people together who have a love of exercise and running in particular, and think, well, how can we put that to good use? So they run around people's houses who are vulnerable, maybe need some loneliness, or are lonely and need some company, or maybe need some work done around the house. They go up, they turn up, and they run to the place. They do the volunteering that they need to do, and then they run back again. So it's a nice social event. It's based around a community of interest, and but they're doing some really good at the same time. My old organisation, Motor Neurone Disease Association, I got in here. I should probably start using other examples. But so this was BT's head office, and these were their technology people who were doing some fundraising for us. But they did so much more than fundraising. So BT, Google, Rolls-Royce, Dell, all these companies came together on a regular basis to solve to do hackathons and solve problems of people living with motor neurone disease. So if you're in America, so that's Lou Gehrig's disease, or the ALS will be more familiar to you. So people with motor neurone diseases, they often lose the ability to speak. So all these brilliant technical minds were able to come together and find ways to help people with LND. But first by helping the technology to where people can bank their voice. So you don't sound like Stephen Hawking, you've got a voice that sounds like yourself. That used to take hours to do with somebody who's losing their voice. Now it can be done in the time it takes to read a small children's book that they designed for us, which is really lovely. And then people, as they lose their voice, it starts to slur terribly. They got things like Alexa working so that it can understand a slurred voice, and they can then obviously operate curtains or blinds in the house and things like that when they're alone. So amazing ways to bring people who have got technical interest but an interest in your cause, bring the two together, and you can achieve amazing results. But of course, there's other communities of identity. I'm mostly thinking of faith groups. Could be around sexuality. It could be single parent families. It could be lots of groups with an identity, but they could come together and say, well, actually, we're really interested in this issue, but we've got our own unique perspective and issues around that, and we could come together, share ideas, club together, meet together, whatever we need to do. And then most frequently, I guess, is particularly for health charities, is that kind of community of need. So the people we're trying to provide support to. Now, we as charities, we often fall into the situation where we're providing services, and that's great. And of course, we need to provide services to the people we're there for. But we're not so good at involving those people who have a need in helping shaping and driving our organizations forward. So in a health organization, you're serving individuals who are suffering with a certain disease, but equally at the same time, they really have an ownership of your organization because it's their cause. It couldn't be more personal if you tried than what it is. So for me, around volunteering and building communities, that's about providing opportunities for people to fight back against the disease, to work with you, to raise awareness, to campaign for better treatment, to provide peer support to their peers. Maybe not about the medical stuff, but maybe it's about life hacks and living with a disease, for instance. So the more we can involve our supporters in helping to shape the opportunities and the ways to drive the charity forward, the charity that quite often they have a real strong belonging to, the better. So communities in need. And then we could just go out and say to people, come and join us. We need some volunteers. Come be a supporter of our organisation, and that's great. But the more we can actually start working with our supporters to say, well, what does it mean to be a supporter of this organisation? What is the shared purpose or the shared link that holds us all together and keeps us together and means that we're moving in the same direction? We're doing things in different ways, but we're all driving towards the same purpose. And it may sound really obvious to say that, but I don't think often we spend enough time really working with our supporters to work out what that is. And once you do that, that helps you really shape the ways that we want people to get involved. But it also means that staff, volunteers, trustees, directors have all got a shared understanding about what we're trying to achieve through our volunteering. And as volunteering leaders, that's really important. And I'm going to try and do something really technical here now, which worries me, which is swap over to a video just to give you a flavour of what I think that looks like. So bear with me for a moment while I stop sharing and do that. So I haven't been watching any comments in the chat, but perhaps we'll pick those up at the end if that's okay.
Yeah, that's no problem. We'll do it afterwards.
Yeah, so right, here we go. I think it's that one.
Your workplace. Your play place.
Let's start at the beginning, shall we?
This is Calgary. Your workplace. Your play place. Your home. When decisions are made that affect your city, community, or your street, is your voice part of the chorus at the table? Okay, so you might vote every few years, but you aren't exactly silent the rest of the time, right? You see things, hear things, and think, hey, this could be better, couldn't it? Well, there are 3 things you can do about that. 1. Ask yourself 3 questions. What am I good at? What do I care about? And what do I have to say about it? 2. Take 3 minutes to write 3 sentences and then talk to 3 friends about what you wrote. Number 3. Go to 3thingsforcalgary.ca and start digging. You'll find tons of simple ideas broken down into 3 things you can do to help you get started. There are over 1 million people in this great city, and there are lots of things we can all do to make it even better. When we want to get together to do something in unison, we always start by counting to 3.
So I hope that helps. I absolutely adore that video, and I think it's the best way that I've found of really showing what the shared purpose and building a community where everybody's coming together, not doing the things necessarily which are regimented tasks provided by us as an organisation, but about where we can come together and convene people to shape the organisation that they want to convene people together, so to shape the organisation that we want to bring together and what they want, rather than just providing a uniform list of volunteer opportunities. So I'm waffling because I'm trying to get back onto PowerPoint. And I'm showing how difficult it is to multitask.
I love that video, and I think the music always gets me. You know, that really somber music. That like,
yeah, you've heard it before.
I just love it.
Yeah, well, there you go. So do I. Now, are we on the right screen? Someone just tell me back on PowerPoint.
All good.
Yeah, good. I've seemed to flip back a slide, but don't worry about that. So the next thing I wanted to say was about marketing, really. Now, it sounds obvious, but I think we've found, I've been involved in this maybe too many years, but 25 years. But for a long while, it was really easy to find. It was easier to find volunteers. We put an advert out, we asked for volunteers, and a good number came along, and we selected the ones we wanted. I mean, those days are gone. And so they should probably. We now need to really think about volunteering in a much smarter way, as I said at the beginning. And for me, that really starts as thinking of our volunteers and our supporters as customers, not resources. So, I mean, for me, that sounds obvious, but it's about not just thinking, well, what do we need? And let's go out and find those people. It's about recognizing this has become a marketing challenge. And people could be watching Netflix, they could be watching the football, they could be down the pub, they could be out dating, they could be playing sport, they could be doing literally anything other than volunteering for you. It's a crowded marketplace, and we are competing in that marketplace, not in just against other volunteering organisations for these volunteers' time. So if we don't put together a really deliberate marketing, well thought through marketing plan and strategy, we're unlikely to reach the numbers of people we want, and we're even less likely to reach the type of volunteers that we want. So I suppose it's one simple slide to say something actually I suppose is also simple, but I think we forget so often is that we really do need to think smartly about how we reach those individuals to build this community up. And I often work with people, just, simple forms. It doesn't have to be complicated, but really think about, so in the onion, where at the beginning we've identified a group of people that we really want to reach out to. We haven't done it so far. Maybe there's some elements of diversity or something there. We might want younger volunteers, for instance. Well, okay, now we need to devise a plan for both reaching those individuals, but also keeping them engaged in our organisation in a long-term manner. So for me, just draw up some personas. So as a young volunteer I don't know, interested in science, I don't know what it might be. I would want to be involved in, what would I want to be involved in? I'll be motivated by X, Y, and Z. I'll need help with this and that. Things that are going to grab my attention are this. I'm likely to be searching for opportunities in certain places. So if I'm a young volunteer, I'm not going to be searching for opportunities on Facebook. My expectations are this. I'd like to be communicated by certain methods. Volunteero has a lovely push notification, but I didn't mean to plug you, but I can help it. And my opportunities will look like X, Y. I mean, and you can add other questions to that, but it's really important that we build up an understanding of the people that we're trying to reach, and recognizing that different members of the community that we try to build will want different things. And it's harder work for us as professionals, and it may mean we can't be all things to all people, but the more we understand those individuals, the more we can scope a strategy that's most likely to bring better dividends for us as individual professionals and as organizations as well. And then I say, create your marketing mix. It is basic 101 marketing. It's not rocket science, but I think we forget it. And I don't think we always think of volunteering as a marketing exercise, as I say. So it is important to think about what is the products you're trying to sell. What does it look like? What are its features? What will attract people to being involved in those opportunities? What are the choices that are involved? What are the variations? How you reward people and so on? What's the social elements? What are the barriers to get to taking part and getting involved? What's the time commitment? What are you going to be paying expenses and so on? Where are you going to market these opportunities? Where's it going to take place? What are the channels of this more and more online marketing? Who's your typical audience? And then the style, the messaging, and all the advert stuff, tailored to the audience that you're trying to reach, using language. I mean, I've been, swapping between volunteering and participation and supporting today. You'll need to find a language that works for each of these groups. And quite often it's probably, well, in a lot of cases anyway, it's not going to be volunteering. So actually we do need to look at some of the language and adapt it to the audience that we're working with. And it may be obvious for me to say co-produce all these solutions with your existing volunteers. But I don't say that just because it's, we're going to generate some great ideas, which is important in itself. But because if you're going to change things up, so say you go to your organization, say we want loads more younger volunteers. And to do that, we need to work in different ways. We need to use a volunteer management system that's a little bit more technical than they might have used by picking up the phone before. Well, your existing volunteers have a sort of psychological contract with you as an organization. They've been there for years. They've been doing things a certain way. And that change program is difficult. So the more you can work with your existing volunteers, just not to get them to adapt to new ways of working necessarily, but to say, we want to attract new volunteers and younger volunteers in this case. We know that they want to communicate with us in different ways. How do we address that? Help them, let them work with you to address those needs and come on that journey with you. It's much better than kind of enforcing solutions on people. Again, we want them to feel involved and feel that they belong in the organizations too. But aside from that, they're probably going to have some brilliant ideas anyway, and they're going to have better insights than we could ever have because they're doing the roles or they've seen the gaps. So why wouldn't you involve them in doing that? But what I suppose the word of caution is make sure you speak to a nice wide variety of people, otherwise you get the same voices and the same solutions. Of course, we want some diversity in there too. And then above all, test, learn, stay inquisitive. Things don't work always first time. Try something new. Listen to your volunteers. Keep going back. Listen to your supporters. Trial and error is the way to get you there in the end. And I want to finish with one more video if I have time. I think we do. So I'll stop sharing again. I'm sure there's a more seamless way to do this. No, it. Sorry, done the wrong one, haven't I?
Demographic and social change in the UK and worldwide simply means the way charities have thought about supporter participation for decades has to change. The ways people wish to volunteer are changing. The time well spent research by NCVO in 2023 demonstrated the most popular reasons for not volunteering. The research indicated that a third of people stated that reluctance to make an ongoing commitment is the key reason they don't volunteer. It is clear that for charities to engage supporters in active involvement in their causes, they need to think creatively about how to add flexibility to their volunteering opportunities. So, we started Time for Impact to help charities, not-for-profits and community groups maximize the untapped goodwill in their cause communities. All charities have cause communities made up of active supporters and others who are rooting for the cause but not actively involved. These less active supporters may be current or past beneficiaries, their friends and family, or simply people moved by the injustice and plight of the cause. Charities are usually pretty successful at mobilizing supporters in volunteering their time on a regular basis, perhaps helping in a shop, befriending someone who is isolated or vulnerable, or helping out in a food bank. They are usually pretty adept at engaging supporters in fundraising activity, running marathons or running bake sales. But, these individuals account for a minority of a charity's support base. Furthermore, they are often overdeployed in multiple volunteer or fundraising roles and slowly become burnt out through years of duty for the cause, with limited respite or succession planning. The sector too often focuses on the short-term pressure of filling roles rather than the long-term lifetime benefit of building communities. Fill a role and there will be support today, but build a community and there will be willing participants for years to come. So, the role of Time for Impact is to help charities to build participation and community building and mobilization into their strategic plans. We want to help charities to leverage and build their whole cause community, not just those that fit nicely into well-defined roles. Many supporters simply do not know how their time, interests and skills may align with the charity's needs. They want to help, but the paperwork and processes or the need to sign up to regular or prescribed roles puts them off. Supporters want to help in their own ways, and have power to define their involvement, not just to fill predetermined roles. So, we help charities build an environment which supports this. Many supporters have significant lived experience, so we help charities explore how they can partner with people with lived experience to improve existing services and build new services to address needs. We built our participation readiness assessment tool to help charities and communities.
I'll stop there because there's only so much of an advert you want from me, I'm sure. But hopefully, apart from being an advert, it also starts to demonstrate the opportunity. So I'm hesitating here because I've lost my screen. It starts to demonstrate some of the stuff that we talked about already today, hopefully, in terms of participation, shared purpose, new ways of thinking, and so on.
Thank you so much, Chris.
I'll stop there. My last slide was just, which I will get to eventually, was just how to contact me. So, should we start on questions and any feedback, and I'll do that while we're talking. Sorry.
No, don't worry. I loved that presentation. I've written probably 3 pages of notes on it, so thank you for that. And so many things I'm like writing down, like, you know, I know my colleague James is always talking about single supporter view of volunteers and fundraisers. And it's interesting, you know, we talked to a lot of people, and it'd be actually interesting to hear from this group, where does your volunteer team sit? Is it in services? Is it in communities? Is it in fundraising? Is it in HR? And you really see the difference in where they focus, is where they sit. So volunteering and fundraising it definitely aligns, and that single supporter view of donors are, your donors are volunteers and your volunteers are donors. I mean, they're all giving something, either it's time or money or both. And you're right about being data poor. And that's why we always talk about, you know, your volunteer management system talking to your fundraising platform and vice versa, because when you're thanking a volunteer, you can say thank you also for donating. And if you're thanking for a fundraising director, thanking their donors and saying, oh, and thank you for X amount of hours you have spent volunteering. It's a really nice personal touch. Also, you also said about co-produce. Sorry if I'm talking so much, but I'm like just really excited with everything you said. I don't know if you could
Thank
see
you for
me
summarising.
I was like nodding along to everything you were saying. I was like, yes. Co-produce, I think, is so on it. You know, ask your volunteers to help recruit, give you ideas. I'm going to put in the chat. There's a really good TikTok I found of a volunteer day in the life by a local citizen advice. And this volunteer did a day in the life and filmed it of like, what if you were to volunteer, this is what your day will look like. And that was free to make. A volunteer did it, cut it herself and posted on TikTok, which I thought was really good. So anyway, that was my little 2 cents. Anyone else have any questions?
Don't be shy. Come on. Michael,
Going on from, sorry, I was just going on from the whole getting volunteers involved, the TikTok side of things. We're really starting to push that at the minute. So we've had a fosterer do a story of being a fosterer. So the fostering dogs, that's come about. And then we've done like the day, like join our event team, and we've done that. And I do really want to do a day in the life of. So yeah, I just wanted to say I'm on that page, so it's quite exciting to hear.
good to hear. And if you go on TikTok or Instagram, I think likewise, quite often, I still think it's a very noisy place, of course, but actually from a volunteering perspective, it's quite quiet. There's not that many charities really making enough use, certainly in volunteering, of those. So I think there's a real opportunity apart from it.
And I think that common cause is really important. That's something I listened to Rob Jackson podcast, and he was talking about very much around, rather than we urgently need volunteers with the poster, looking at it differently. So I've adapted a lot of that into our recruitment. So around, actually you're here because of the dogs, we're here because of the dogs, and how can we collectively do that? So it's about, I guess, using the dog stories and the dog impact, and then looking at their volunteer impact. So if they're giving us X amount of hours a year, what does that mean? What does that mean to the dogs? So we've tried to put a lot out there for that. So, and that's worked really well. The volunteers quite like it when they see like, oh, well, if I give, I don't know, 10 hours of volunteering, that could, in theory, if it was put into like money, could help us neuter a dog. So that's kind of how they can see that impact of like, by me giving those hours, what does that do? So we've used that quite a lot and successfully. And just give 2 hours is a thing that was really successful. You know, like, can you just give us a couple of hours? And what that means to the dogs. And also, it doesn't sound like a huge commitment. You know, I think we worked out with our Pets at Home, which is fundraising, the amount of money we got off Pets at Home worked out that we were helping 25 dogs. So if you could just give us 2 hours of your time, you could help up to 25 dogs, which sounds amazing, and it is amazing, but it's through the money that Pets at Home give us. And that was successful. People quite like that because it was not that huge commitment.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, well done for actually having the data, which is half the battle. And you know, I mean, I say that half jokingly, but you know, a lot of organisations just do not have that data. I suppose I would say that somebody helps organisations on measuring the impact of volunteering. It's really important. But yeah, no, I agree. And volunteers really want to see the impact they're making. And again, it's all, I haven't had a chance to go over that today, but it's only so much time. But you know, the shared purpose. And, you know, you describe the shared purpose around the dogs, but also a feedback loop that says, well, actually, this is how what you're doing is really making a difference. Keep coming back and doing more or something else. It's great. Yeah.
I guess vet fees are easier because we just get the bill, don't we? So we can see.
Well, yeah, it's easier to. It's always easier to analyze financial stuff, but actually, you know, most people agree that volunteering is a really good thing, including your CEO and your trustees, but not all of them are able to articulate quite how it makes a big impact and how strategically important it is to their organizations. And I will say, well, no one's going to do that if we don't do it. If us as volunteer professionals don't spend the time working out where we make the biggest impact. And it's not always financial, sometimes it's case studies and so on. But the impact both on the individuals we work with, the cause that we're working for, the organization and the community and our funders. I mean, we should be building all those things into our thinking. But it's hard work, right?
No, that's really good. And also, I'm in like a local mum WhatsApp group, and it's really clever. We have a local baby bank, and whenever they need new things, you know, for their referrals, like, you know, sleeping bags or muslins or, you know, cots, they have like lead volunteers who are like ambassadors, and they will go into these. So let's say, so there's one of the volunteers is in this local mum WhatsApp group, and she'll always be like, okay, we need XYZ, and everyone's then saying, oh, I got plenty of those. But not everyone in the charity would be able to be in this mum WhatsApp group because they're not local or they're not a mum. So it's good to have those volunteers who can go into those communities and be a part of those communities and then spread your word. And now, you know, I donated to them when they just did their fundraising because I know all the work they do, because how many times they're asking for referrals. So it's important to look at your volunteers and what communities they're part of, exactly what you said.
Worth remembering as well, especially if you're a national organisation, is one of, you know, I showed that graph at the beginning showing a downward trend in volunteering. One of the things that sort of bucks that trend, or at least isn't quite so bad, is around people volunteering for their local communities. And it's quite hard for a national organisation to look and feel local. But actually, the antidote to that problem is your local volunteers. They can act local, they can be local, they can be in that WhatsApp group. So yeah, it helps with that image, but also it means that if you can advertise or build that into your marketing when you're recruiting volunteers or when you're involving volunteers and helping them feel connected to the local community, my hypothesis is that that will actually help you bring in and retain more volunteers as well. I'm not proving it, but that's the hypothesis.
No, that's really helpful. I think unless anyone has any other questions, I think I'm going to leave it there. This was so interesting, and thank you so much. Yes, it's recorded now, so we will upload it. We'll send it with the follow-up if anyone wants to take a look at the slides. If you don't mind, I'll also share the slides, and someone's asked me for the videos you shared. Our next meetup is next month, and that's just no formal topic. We're just going to do a volunteer managers group. Anyone can join and bring their own topic they want to discuss. And definitely check out Chris Wade's LinkedIn and his podcast. Kirsty, you said you like podcasts. I highly recommend this one. And Ash has actually joined. I think our CEO Ash is joining your next one.
Well, he's recording one very soon for sure. Yeah.
Well, I'm very excited for that one. So really. And thanks for plugging Volunteer a couple of times. Didn't go unnoticed, Chris. Well, thank you very much, and hope you all have a good rest of the day, and see you next month.
Bye, everybody. Nice to see some of you tomorrow.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Chris.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.